Okay, everyone, let's begin. We have a great crowd here today. This is really exciting. We've got almost 80 people here. Thank you so much for coming. So, okay, I've been told I have to be official about this. Okay, all right. Okay, thank you so much for coming today. I'm Lucy Birmingham, the president of the Foreign Correspondents Club of Japan. We've got Takamatsu-san here as the interpreter. As always, she's going to do a great job. Before I introduce our two very fabulous speakers, I'm very happy to announce that this is our first in a speaker series on women. Now that the topic of working women is in Japan is finally at the top of the government's agenda and making news headlines. Today we have a very nice combination of women in government and media speaking about Womanomics. Is it for real? The truth about working women in Japan. Maybe they'll talk a little bit about their survival techniques. Yeah. We'll also be offering speakers on women in business, women in science, women in the media, women in the arts, and much more. So please keep an eye out for our notices on the website and at the club. Our website, of course, is fccj.or.jp, and also our Facebook page and Twitter. So just a bit of housekeeping. I will always be doing housekeeping. Please don't forget to turn off your telephones, put them on silent mode, please. Okay, so let me introduce our two great guest speakers. To my right is Nami Abe, a senior staff writer and former editor-in-chief of the Working Women's section page of the Nihon Keizai Shimbun. To my far right is Riwa Sakamoto, who is with METI, the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry. She's been a longtime champion of diversity and promoter of equal rights in the corporate world. So please give a warm welcome to Riwa Sakamoto and Nami Abe. So Abe-san, you're going to speak first, right? Okay, thank you.
Hello, everyone. It is a great pleasure to be here as a guest speaker. My name is Abe Nami. Well, everybody says Abenomics, right? But my name is Abe Nami. So every time I hear the word Abenomics, I'm worried about I'm just wondering if they are talking about me. Just because it sounds like my name, confusing me. Well, I'm just kidding. Well, excuse me. You're supposed to laugh now. But anyway, I'm a senior staff writer of the Nikkei Shimbun. The Nikkei... Oh. Open. Okay. Thank you. I'm a senior staff writer of the Nikkei. The Nikkei is the largest economic newspaper in Asia. So today I'm going to talk about Womanomics, for real or not. From now on, I'm going to speak Japanese just because we have very, very distinguished interpreter Tamako-san here. ではいきます。女性の活躍推進あるいはダイバーシティと言いますと、まだまだ総論賛成、各論反対、そういう雰囲気を取材していて感じます。しかしながら日本経済あるいは社会はこのままでは立ち行かなくなってしまうんじゃないでしょうか。私はそういうふうに思っております。私は20数年間にわたって企業取材をずっとやってきました。取材を通して経営者にお会いする機会が非常に多いんですけれども、今週の月曜日もある大手グローバルカンパニーの会長をインタビューしてきましたけれども、彼らの意識が非常に最近変わってきたなってすごく思います。なんて言うんでしょう、このままではいけないなっていう、そういうなんか潮目が変わったなっていうのを実感しております。で、今日はですね、私のこうした記者としての普段感じていることを交えながら、本当に女性の活躍推進は日本経済あるいは社会を救うのか本当なのか、その辺のところをお話ししたいと思います。私がそっかすいません。じゃあはい。
So, of course, we hear so many wonderful phrases nowadays: the promotion of women's activities, the promotion of diversity. These are, however, topics that everybody agrees with in terms of general concepts. But when you get down to the specifics, there are many, many disagreements. Having said this, however, I have been covering the business field in Japan for many, many years, for more than 20 years. And I think there is a change in the air. I think many, many people are beginning to understand that if things remain the way they are, then Japanese society and the Japanese economy will lose its vitality. It will hit a terrible wall. As I mentioned, I've covered business matters for the past 20 plus years, and as a result, I've had the opportunity throughout my career to meet many, many Japanese businessmen, leaders, managers. In fact, last Monday, I interviewed the chairman of a very large global company, and I felt speaking with him that even his thinking or awareness is changing. In other words, I think that people have this idea that unless we change our ways, unless we transform Japan in some way, things are going to turn out very terrible. In other words, I think the tide is changing. Therefore, I'm going to be talking about today's topic, which is the promotion of women's activities in Japan, and I will intersperse my comments, my observations with things that I have felt covering the Japanese economy for 20 years.
私が入社したのは1990年です。バブル真っ只中の時だったんですけれども、当時若かったんですが、若い私が取材に行くとですね、企業の経営者はもうほとんどの人がこう言いました。うちの会社はね、たくさん女性が活躍している素晴らしい会社なんだよ。福利厚生はこんなのある。保育の制度もこんなのがある。すごくアピールしてました。これはね、ほとんど企業の戦略、イメージ戦略だったんですね。新聞記者と、経営者の関係、取材先の関係は取材を重ねていくうちに信頼関係っていうのができてくるわけですね。そうすると本音が出てきます。ある日言いました。その経営者たちは、なんて言うんでしょうね。女性はいらないよ。女性の社員なんてもういらない。私は聞きました。なんでですか？どうして？そしたら彼らはこう言いましたね。みんな揃って同じことを言いましたね。別々の時に聞いたんですけれども、女性社員は時間と教育コストをかけてせっかく育てたのに辞めちゃうんだよね。教育コストが回収できないよ、こんなんじゃ。そういうことでだんだん辞めるんだったらっていうことで、もともと採用だってそんなに男性みたいにしないし、チャンスだってそんなに男性と同じようには与えないぞみたいな、そういうだんだんその負のスパイラルみたいな、そんなことになってきてしまったんですね。これが昔、90年代の頃です。今どうか、同じ企業の経営者、世代は変わっていますけれども、聞きますと、彼らはものすごく変わりましたね、いうことが。男性であれ女性であれ、組織にとって貴重な存在であるならば、優秀な人であるならばですよ、男性であれ女性であれ、時間的に制約のある働き方しかできない、そういう時期であろうともなんとか乗り越え、それも会社がサポートするからずっとうちの会社で働き続けてもらいたい、そういうふうに考え、そして人事の制度ですとか、あるいは雇用慣行、そういったものに、改革、もうメスを入れています今。はい、お願いします。
はい。So as I mentioned, I have been working at the Nikkei for over 20 years. Actually, I entered the company in 1990, and that was in the middle of the bubble period. I was a young reporter, but I would be able to have access to Japanese managers, top people within Japanese companies. And even though I was a young reporter, the first thing that they would say to me was give very, very positive comments about women in their company. They would all say, we have lots of female employees. We have wonderful benefits. The women seem to enjoy working with us. We have many child rearing and other related activities that will help support them. We feel that it is a wonderful place for women to work. However, after a time, I began to realize that these words, and it's funny, almost the similar words were used by various leaders in various different companies. I began to realize that these phrases were used by companies as part of their corporate image strategy. In other words, they want to develop a very, very good impression for they wanted people to have a good impression of their company. Also, when you work as a reporter, you do cover a field for some years, and as a result, you visit companies repeatedly. And after a while, you begin to develop a relationship of trust, and people begin to speak more honestly and from the heart. And after a while, these same people would begin to say, you know what, the truth is, we don't want women. We don't like female employees. And surprised, I would ask, why is this so? And the answers that they would give me would invariably be the same, even if it was for different companies, different managers at different periods, interviewing them on an individual basis. They would all give the same responses, which was that we spend a great deal of money and effort in trying to train and educate these female employees, but they almost invariably always quit. And we simply cannot recoup those educational costs, training costs that we invested in them. So if they're going to quit anyway, then there's no real need for us to employ female employees to begin with. And even if we do employ female employees, there's no reason for us to give them the opportunities that we might give male employees because they're just not going to stay with us that long. However, this was in the 1990s, and now I go back to the same companies. Of course, there have been generational changes in the upper management, and the people are different, but still, I see that there has been a great change in the way of thinking. It's not just new people, it's a new way of thinking. The fundamental rationale, the fundamental thinking that leaders of companies have today is that whether it's a man, whether it's a woman, if it's someone that's important to the company who can eventually contribute tremendous amounts to this company, if it's an outstanding, brilliant employee, even if that person is going through a period where he cannot work full time or give full commitment, he has time constraints on his working style, we as a company intend to support that person so that he will or she will be able to stay with the company over the long term. In other words, many company leaders are seriously embarking on implementing reforms to employment practices, to personnel practices within their companies.
で、その意識が変わったのには理由は2つあると思います。一つは人口減。これ皆さんよくご存知だと思いますけれども、日本の人口は今自然減だけで毎年20数万人ずつ減っています。これ20数万人っていうとちょっとイメージが湧かないかと思うんですけれども、この辺りでいうと東京都内でいうと調布市1個丸々分の人口に匹敵します。そして、埼玉県で言えば春日部市、あるいは神奈川県でいうと厚木市、西の方行きますと大阪府ですと寝屋川市、兵庫県だと宝塚市、この辺りが22、3万人ぐらいなんですね。一つのシティの、人口、これに匹敵する、人たちがどんどん自然減だけで毎年減っているんですね。で、これどういうことかと言いますと、生産年齢人口、つまり、15歳から64歳までの生産年齢人口、その中で働く意欲があって働きたいと思っていて働く力もある人たち、労働力人口と言いますけれども、これも確実に減っていく。こういう厳しい現実をですね、経営者たちは突きつけられて、これはまずいぞと。で、日本は移民の政策を、積極的には行っておりませんので、今の段階では。そうするとどうするんだよこのままではと、うかうかしていると人材という面で、グローバルな市場でコンペティターと戦えなくなってしまうんじゃないか、そういうふうな危機感、人材不足、労働力不足、それに対して非常に危機感を強めています。
Why has the tide changed? Why are company leaders changing the way they view women and the way they view employment practices? I think there are two reasons. The first reason can be described as a decrease in population. As you know, the Japanese population is decreasing. We call this natural decrease that is occurring. The population is decreasing in a natural way, which means simply, calculating the number of births and number of deaths each year. The population of Japan is decreasing each year by about 200,000 people. And that 200,000 people may not ring a bell with you, but if you look around the Tokyo area, you see the city of Chofu, which has about 200,000 people. It's as though that city disappeared in a year. Around in Saitama Prefecture, we have Kasukabe City, that also has about 200,000 people. In Kanagawa Prefecture, we have Atsugi City, similar population. If we look to the west, in Osaka, we have Neagawa City. And also in Hyogo Prefecture, we have Takarazuka City. All of these are about 200, 230, 220,000 people. It's as though these huge cities, metropolises, are disappearing. Of course, the problem is even more serious than that because it is not just simply population decrease, but working population decrease. When we talk about the working age population, that's people 15 to 64 years old. We look at this population and we break it down even further, and there is something called the labor force, which means you look at the working age population, 15 to 64-year-old people, and you see which people want to work, and you see which people have the ability to work. This is what we call the labor force, and that labor force is decreasing year by year. Japanese managers are very, very aware of this problem. They're also aware of the fact that immigration policies at present are not being seriously proposed or discussed in Japan as a way to alleviate this population decrease problem. As a result, people realize that in the future we are going to run across a very, very serious, critical labor shortage.
M 字カーブって皆さんご存知かもしれませんけれども、女性の、労働力の状況をグラフに取ったものですね。縦軸が、労働参加率、横軸が、年齢別に取るとちょうど、これ詳しくは坂本さんの方から後で、説明があると思うんですけれども、ちょうど日本の場合は M、アルファベットの M の字を、に似た形をとっているので M 字カーブっていうんですけれども、ちょうど山の2つは20代の後半、そして、後ろの方の山は40代の後半で、真ん中のくぼみ、バーレーのところはですね、谷間はですね、これは30代なんですね。これは何かというと、出産と重なる時期が、この時期に集中しているわけですが、なんと日本では、第一子、最初のベイビーを持った時に、退職する人が、働く女性の6割、この状況が過去20年間変わっていないんですね。だからこの M 字っていうのは、日本とか韓国はそうなんですけど、他の国は大体先進国がこう hills 丘のような形をしているんですが、安倍政権はここをもうちょっとこのくぼみの部分を少しでも上げれば、GDP だって上がるんじゃないか、日本経済がもっと活性化されるんじゃないか、untapped human resources、眠れる人材、これは女性なんじゃないか、そういうふうに思うようになってきています。
I think many of you here are aware of the concept of the M curve in Japanese society. This refers to if you have a graph, and the vertical axis would represent the female labor participation rate, how many people are actually working out of the general population, and then the horizontal axis is your age. Basically, you see that there's a mountain, a valley, and a mountain. And basically what this means is that the mountain is working women in their late 20s, and then the next mountain is working women in their late 40s, and the valley in between represents people in their 30s. And the reason it's a drop in the female labor participation rate is that there is still tradition in Japan that when working women have their first child, they tend to leave work. And in fact, 60% of working women still leave work after their first child, and that figure has basically not changed for a very long time. So you can see that the graph looks like an M, and it's considered very unique to Japan and also South Korea. In most advanced nations of the world, it's not so much a huge mountain valley and a huge mountain, but rather more like hills. And what Prime Minister Abe is trying very, very hard to do is trying to reduce that huge drop from mountain peak to valley and make it more flat or smooth, because he believes very, very strongly, and I think many company leaders and managers also feel very strongly that if we can somehow alleviate this M curve, then we will be able to bring vitality back to the Japanese economy and Japanese society. In other words, helping working women continue to work is to reach into the sleeping, untapped human resources that they represent.
経営者の意識が変わってきたのは2つ理由があると申し上げましたけれども、2つ目の理由はですね、なんて言うんでしょう、雇用モデルがもう限界に来ているということですね。どういうことかと言いますと、今もう変化とスピードが求められるこの時代に勝ち残るためにはもうイノベーションがもう必要であると。しかしながら日本企業というのは高度経済時代に形成されてきた日本的雇用慣行、つまり正社員をどっと新卒で取ってですね、オンザジョブトレーニングで鍛え上げて社内で競わせて、それでトップに上り詰めていくっていう、こう年次主義とかですね、あとはライフタイムのエンプロイメントとかですね、セニョリティベースペイメントシステムとかプロモーションシステムとか、そういう雇用慣行があって非常に流動性が低いわけですね。でこのままではこのなんて言うんでしょう、雇用がもうこの今までの日本的雇用慣行のままではなくて、モデルチェンジしないととてもじゃないけどグローバル市場でコンペティターと戦っても勝てないんじゃないかと、そういうなんて言うんでしょう、雇用モデルの限界っていうのを感じているわけですね。でそこでダイバーシティというのが出てくるわけですが、異なるバックグラウンドの人、性別あるいは国籍、年齢、 あるいは経歴、学歴、経験、もういろんなバックグラウンドの人が異なるアイデアとアイデアがぶつかり合った方がイノベーションは生まれやすい環境なわけですね。そういうふうに組織を変えたい。正社員が一丸となって同じことを考えてみんなで長時間労働して経済成長というか、企業の競争力を高めてきたっていう時代は確かに過去にはあったんですが、このままではダメだと、そういうふうに思い始めています。
I mentioned earlier that there were two reasons why I believe that managers' awareness has changed about employment. The first one had to do with population decrease. The second reason that they feel there's a need for change is that they understand that in order to be able to compete successfully in the global markets, they must have a company that has innovation. And they are beginning to realize that the employment or business model that Japanese companies have had for many, many years is no longer successful. In other words, it's reached the limits of its potential. In other words, we live in an age now where speed and change is what is demanded by the markets. In other words, the only way to be able to respond to the speed and change that we see in society is to respond by being innovative, providing new products and new services. However, the Japanese business model, which now needs change, was developed during the high economic growth period of Japanese history. This was a time when you had all of the aspects of Japanese companies that are very famous today. For example, seniority-based pay, seniority-based promotion, lifelong employment. Basically, the idea of employing many graduates from college all at once or high school all at once, and then making them compete with each other all in the same year. In other words, the idea of being in one organization for a very, very long time with very, very little labor fluidity. This was something that worked during the high economic growth period, but it is no longer a business or employment model that works today. And many company managers are beginning to realize that. They realize they cannot compete on the global stage. And as a result of this awareness, this has given rise to a new term, which is called diversity. And of course, diversity means that you have a diverse labor force. Diverse meaning they come from different backgrounds, they are of different ages, they have different genders, they have different nationalities, they have different values, professional careers. People are beginning to realize that it is only when you have people in a group with very, very different ideas and you allow these different ideas to clash against each other, that is the only time you can have the birth of innovation, innovative ideas. In other words, this is what people are beginning to realize is necessary for Japan.
しかしながらダイバーシティは、企業の活力の源泉と言われているんですが、実際の企業どうでしょうかと。もともと女性をこれまで取ってこなかった企業とか男社会だった、製造業ですとか金融保険、そういった業界のテニュアですね、勤続年数、男性の正社員の、勤続年数の平均でいうと15年とかですね、そのぐらいになるんですね。そういうところの女性の管理職、部長課長級に占める割合っていうのは 6% とかその程度なわけですね。しかしこれは、何がじゃあどうしてここまでダイバーシティが進まないのかと、頭では分かってるんだけどなんで進まないのかっていうと、これは意識の面と、働く側、それから、企業の側、働く女性本人、経営者、みんなそれぞれの意識が変わってないからだっていう部分もあるわけですね。で、肝心の働く女性はどうかと言いますと、日経新聞のグループの中で日経ウーマンという雑誌があるんですけれども、月刊誌ですが、そこで調査をした600人ぐらい有効回答があったんですが、あなたは管理職になりたいですか？そういうふうな質問に対してなんと8割ぐらいが半分ぐらいが、50% ぐらいがなりたくないです。で 30% ぐらいがどっちかわからない。要するに合わせて 80% ぐらいがもうなりたいっていう風な意欲をちゃんと示さないわけですね。で、なりたいって明確に答えた人たちは 18%、 それしかないんですね。で、皆さんよくご存知のような国立の一流のもう有名な難しい大学を出ていても、あなたは卒業したら何になりたいのって聞くとですね、文化系の人なんかは一般職になりたいです、そういうふうに答えるっていうことが日本ではまだあるんですね。まだっていうかあるっていうのがファクトなんですね。で、これはどうしてかというと一つにはですね、冒頭にも申し上げましたように企業の側は、今までですねどういう女性を評価し幹部に育ててきたかといいますと、男社会の企業に関してはですね、男 男働きって日本語で言うんですけれども、男性のように会社のために何でもやりますみたいな無制限に、突然の残業 OK です。突然の何でしょうね、残業もそうだし出張もそうですし、もう単身赴任なんて普通にみんなやってますし、そういう男働きっていうのができる人、こういう人たちしかですね、アマゾネスみたいなね、実は私もこう女性に見えるかもしれないけど、中はアマゾネなんかおじさんかもしれないんですけれども、そういうふうな人間をいっぱい増殖させてしまったというか、それが今の現実なのかもしれませんね。だからそういう先輩を見てると、あんな女性になりたくないとかですね、あんなふうにまでして私は出世したくないのよみたいな、そういう女性がいるっていうのは、現実のものとして受け止めなきゃいけないという、これが今の日本の現実です。
Then, how is the state of diversity in Japanese companies? Well, first of all, I'd like to point out that there seems to be a correlation when you look at a company. There seems to be a correlation between the average tenure or the average number of years that a male employee has worked for that company and how many women have been promoted to managerial positions within that company. What I'm saying is that if you look at more traditional Japanese companies in the finance or insurance industry or the manufacturing industries, you see that men have been employed on an average of about 15 years. That's fairly long-term employment. But you see also that the percentage of female managers in those companies is quite low, about 6% or so. Why is that the case? I think it's a twofold answer. In other words, it has to do with awareness, how you view life and how you view working. And I think it has to do with awareness on the part of the employees and awareness on the part of companies. Just to give you an idea of what I'm saying, as part of my Nikkei group of companies, we have a magazine called Nikkei Women. This is a monthly magazine. And recently we conducted a survey of women, and we had about 600 responses. And the first question we asked was, would you want to become a person in upper management eventually? And unfortunately, some 80% basically said no. The actual breakdown was about 50% said absolutely no, and 30% said I don't know. And the percentage of women who said we do want to become managers eventually was only 18%. This is the very bitter, sobering reality in Japan. And when we talk about the kinds of people that were responding, these are people who are brilliant women. They went to the top universities in Japan, famous universities and national universities. And yet, when they are asked, what kind of work would you want to do in your company? Many of them respond by saying, we want to do what is called, the category of work, what is called ippanshoku, which means general duties, not career track duties. Why is this so? And again, if you break it down even further, you can see that they look at what companies have been doing, and they look at what working women have been doing over the past several decades. Traditionally, in Japanese companies, there have been some women who have been given promotions and have been able to rise within companies. However, these are women who were deemed to be women who could work like a man. And what that means is they could work like traditional Japanese men. In other words, if they were presented with sudden opportunities to go on a business trip, or they were said, you have to work late this evening, or you have to be transferred, they would all respond by saying, no problem whatsoever. In other words, it was only normal for them to go and leave their families and spend several years working in a different location away from their families. They had absolutely no problems with this. They were considered to be women who could work like men. In other words, like Amazonesses or Amazons. And in fact, I am a very good example of this. I must say that on the surface I look very feminine, perhaps I look like a woman, but inside I'm a tough Amazon. And I think, frankly, many of young women who have followed in our footsteps look at us and they say, I don't want to be like that. I don't want to sacrifice my family and my personal life in that way. I just don't want to do that.
ただ企業の側も言い分はあってですね、20代、30代というと私はキャリアの仕込み時だと思うんですね。失敗しながらいろんな経験を積んでだんだん力をつけていって自信をつける、仕事の面白さや醍醐味っていうのも味わうのもこの時期なんですが、やっぱり育児をしながら職場に復帰するとなかなか仕事、責任ある仕事っていうのは任せてもらいにくくなったりして、で企業の側はそんな大事な時期に休まれたり子供が熱を出したって言って早退されたりすると責任ある仕事を任せづらいっていう、こういう現実があるわけですね。で一方キャリア志向のある人、それで復帰したんだけれども時間的に制約のある働き方しかできないっていう人、この人は働きたいんだけれども 責任ある難しい仕事を任せてもらえないってことになると、私はもう組織会社から期待されてないんじゃないかと思って失望して辞めていってしまう、 NPO とか言っちゃったりっていう、そういうケースが非常に多いんですね。この負のスパイラル、これをどうしようかっていうことで今変わってきているわけですね。で、経営者の意識、女性の部下を持つ管理職、あるいは働く女性本人、この人たちの意識っていうのはものすごく今変わりつつあって、今まではですね、経営者や管理職っていうのは女性の活躍推進っていうと、なんて言うんでしょう、優しさを勘違いしててですね、なんか大変そうだから難しい仕事を任せちゃいけないね、そういう感じだったんですけれども、今は、出産は病気ではありませんと、試練、そういうね、試練のチャンスを与えて経験を積んで、できるだけキャリア形成の早い段階で、仕事の面白さっていうのを味わってもらって、出産しても必ず戻ってきてもらう、そういうふうな考え方に今変わりつつあります。
Of course, from the point of view of companies, they have their own justifications for doing what they do. They think, for example, that women all people in their 20s and 30s, this is a very, very important time in a business person's career. It's a time when you are basically preparing for the future and preparing for future positions of responsibility. It's a time when you are allowed to make many, many mistakes. You gain experience, and as you gain experience, you begin to develop more skills and abilities, and that leads to increased confidence. And you also learn the thrill of working, the joy of working, and you realize that this is something you want to do for the long term. However, quite often a woman will have a baby and will come back into the company. However, from the point of view of the company, because that person is very restrained or constrained in terms of being able to work, full hours, because that person will sometimes say, I have to leave work early because my child has just developed a fever. From the point of view of the company, it's very risky for them, and they're very reluctant to give that kind of person a great deal of responsibility. This, of course, works into a negative loop, because the working woman who has gone back to the company hoping that she will be able to revive her career sees that the company doesn't give her very responsible work, doesn't really give her very, very crucial work, and as a result, she begins to feel the company doesn't have great expectations of me, doesn't think I'm promising. She's disappointed, and then she decides to leave the company. In fact, we have seen many, many such talented women become disappointed in their company, leave the company, and work for a different organization such as NPOs. It's a very, very sad negative cycle that we've seen for many years. However, as I have mentioned, things are changing. Awareness is changing, not only on the part of companies, but also on the part of women. I think some years ago, when we talked about trying to promote women in business, trying to promote diversity, I think some people misunderstood that concept. People thought that if you're going to be promoting women, what that meant was that you had to be very understanding and show consideration and be kind and gentle to women. In other words, if they're having a tough time handling a career and family, then you wouldn't burden them with too much responsibility or give them too much hard work. Now, companies are beginning to realize, and women are beginning to also realize, that even if it's tough, even if it's very difficult to maintain this work-life balance, etc., it's better to be given lots of difficult tasks, be able to make many mistakes, and thereby grow.
もう時間がなくなってきたので、最後に私は言いたいことを言いますけれども、日本は今高齢化でですね、もうすごく加速していて、これから介護の問題、親の世代の介護の問題も出てきます。今日本では働きながら家族の介護をしている人っていうのは290万人。統計に現れているだけでそれぐらいいます。その中で、働き盛りの40代あるいは50代というのは、170万人ぐらいですね。毎年介護離職が10万人ずつ、10万人ですよ、10万人ずつ介護を理由に辞めているという人が出てきています。だからね、時間的に制約のある働き方しかできないなんていうのは、これ女性だけの問題じゃなくて、男性にとっても女性にとってもみんなの問題なんですね。だからこそ企業は柔軟な働き方、キャリアが途絶えるかもしれない、途切れるかもしれない、あるいは一時的にちょっともうガンガン働くってことができない時期かもしれないけれども、そこをなんとか乗り越えて、いい人材を流出させないような、そういう手を打っている企業にはいい人材が集まるんではないかと、そういうふうに思っています。今日本は高齢化が進んでいて、医療費がものすごく拡大しているんですけれども、この抑制をするために、社会的入院っていうのを日本はできなくなってるんですね。要するに、高度な医療治療が必要じゃない人は長期で入院ができなくなってすぐ退院させられるんですね。そうするとどこに行くか、介護施設っていうんですけれども、今 何人待ちかご存知ですか皆さん。公的な介護保険が適用される特別養護老人ホームっていうのがあるんですが、特養って訳してるんですね。これなんと最近出た統計では52万人待ちです。よく皆さん保活とか言ってね、英字新聞では保育園に入れない、児童のことが、メディアに取り上げられてますけれども、実は今、介護の介を取って介活かもしれないんですけれども、なんて言うんでしょう、待機高齢者の問題は非常に深刻になっています。で、在宅療養、在宅医療っていうんですが、地域で肝心の介護あるいは医療に携わる人材が圧倒的に不足しています。で、今認知症の予備軍っていうのは入れると、全体でいうと予備軍入れて800万人ぐらいっていうふうに推計されているわけですね。そうすると日本の男性の生涯未婚率、1回も人生で結婚しない人の割合はついに 20% を超えたんですね、最近。そうするとみんなこの問題を、働き盛りの男も女もみんなが抱えることになると。そうすると社会全体でこの仕組みを変えていかないと、労働市場の流動性を高めていかないと、これもう身動きが取れなくなってきますよ。本当にいい人材はそういう働きやすいところにどんどん取られていきます。で、産業っていう意味でもですね、雇用市場の流動性を高めると成長産業に対して、今は成熟産業にずっとしがみついている人材、優秀な人材いっぱいいるんですが、成長産業、サービス産業ですとか医療とかそういうふうなところに、人がですねシフトしやすくなるという、そういうこともあるわけですね。そういう意味でも今は大きな転換期、第2フェーズに日本経済は入ってきたんじゃないかと、そういうふうに思っております。
So I'm running out of time, so I'd like to wrap up and just to make a few other comments. One is that we've been talking a great deal about women and working women and the challenges that they face. I would also like to point out there's another huge change in Japanese society, which is the growing numbers of the elderly. In fact, nursing care, taking care of one's parents, is a huge problem and will become a more huger problem in the near future. Already, it is said that if just looking at the public statistics, there are some 2.9 million working people who are also involved in taking care of elderly parents. If we look at people at the prime of life, in other words, the people who are making greatest contributions to the working environment, people in their 40s and 50s, there are some 1.7 million people who have to work and also take care of their aging parents. In fact, some people find the challenge so difficult that they have to leave their jobs. Each year, some 100,000 people have to leave their place of employment because they have to take care of these aging parents. In other words, we've been talking about women and how they are constrained in terms of working hours because they have to take care of family. Well, it's no longer just working women and children. It's men and women and taking care of elderly parents that is going to be a huge issue for the labor market. In other words, as these changes affect society, Japanese companies will have to become even more flexible than ever before. They're going to have to realize and accept the fact that all of their employees are not going to be able to devote 120% of their lives just to working for the companies. They will have to spend some time, it won't be forever necessarily, but for some years out of their life taking care of family concerns. And I believe that, for example, this problem is going to get worse in part because medical policies are also beginning to change. As you know, medical costs for the government are a huge issue. So some of the policies in which aging parents could be put into hospitals for long-term care, that is going to be less possible in the near future. In other words, if you have a parent who is frail but who does not necessarily need advanced medical care, you're not going to be able to put them in hospitals for long-term stays as before. What does that mean? That means that there are now huge waiting lists for aging people to get into what we call intensive care nursing homes. This is a special designation of nursing homes where you can use social insurance. But just looking at the official list, there are 520,000 people nationwide who are on these waiting lists. Quite often we talk about waiting lists for childcare facilities, but the waiting list for these nursing care facilities is also a huge problem. Of course, the answer that the government recommends is that these people who don't need advanced medical care can be looked at in the home. But when we look at the regional level, the local community level, the number of people who are able to look after these people, there's a huge lack of such personnel. In other words, We don't have these personnel that can look after people in their homes. I would also like to point out another thing, that the number of men who will probably never get married during their entire lives, that percentage has gone beyond 20% recently. It means now that there are going to be not just women, but many, many men who are going to also... There are going to be men also who are going to have to sacrifice a part of their working efforts to take care of their aging parents. As a result, this is not a problem that we can simply push into one corner and say it's only a problem for a certain group of people. It's a problem that affects all of society. Unless we have more fluidity and more understanding, flexibility in labor employment practices, we're not going to be able to defeat these terrible problems that we're going to be facing. Once we have more labor fluidity, once we have more flexible labor practices, it means we'll see another positive development. One of the problems that Japan faces is that we have many, many outstanding employees in mature industries. They cling to their old jobs. They're afraid to go into a new area. If we can have more labor fluidity, they could go into new growth industries. This is something that is going to help transform Japan as well. So what I'm saying, and I've been saying this very, very fast, is that I think Japan has reached a huge epical point of transformation. We're entering a huge new second phase of the Japanese economy.
そうですね、本当フェーズが変わったと思っています。最後一言、安倍政権はですね、今成長戦略に女性の活躍推進を掲げてるんですが、今までね、日本で女性の活躍推進というと、どうしてもウーマンリブですとか人権、あるいは、男女共同参画みたいなね、そういう、あるいは福祉ですとか、そういう視点で語られてくることが多かったと思うんですが、それはそれで私は重要だと思うんですけれども、それを超えてですね、今回は日本経済あるいは社会が成長、持続的にこれから成長していくためにというふうに位置づけたところが大きいというふうに思っております。短いですがこれで終わらせていただきます。
I would just like to make one last point. As you know, Prime Minister Abe has made a very, very big point of promoting women in business as a way to deal with the growth issues for the Japanese economy. In other words, it's part of his growth strategy to promote women. I would like to point out that what he's saying, however, is very, very different from what previous policymakers have said. In other words, there has been this idea in the past of promoting women, but it's usually been around the concepts of human rights issues or women's lib issues or having equal participation between men and women in society and welfare issues. This is the first time, I think, that a prime minister has said we want to promote women not for these kinds of issues, which are all important, but because this is a way to revive and revitalize the Japanese economy. In other words, the only way to attain sustainable growth for Japanese society and the Japanese economy is to promote women. This, I think, is a significant and really tide-changing difference between what other politicians have said and Mr. Abe has said. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Abe-san. That was really interesting. Okay, Sakamoto-san, よろしくお願いします。
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm from METI. I have been working for almost 3 years for this theme, women empowerment, as part of economic policy. And today it's my great pleasure to be here and have this big chance to introduce you what we are doing as the government. And today, here are today's agenda. You can follow the handout, please. First, I would like to introduce some important data to show the current state in Japan of working women. And then I would introduce Prime Minister's message promoting working women for Japan's growth policy. And the last important part is the issues and METIs, our program. First, as Abe-san mentioned at the last speech, this is the M-shaped curve. And while there has been a gradual trend toward improvement, Japan is still strikingly behind when we compare it to the countries of Europe and elsewhere. The curve seems to have gradually improved, but actually, If you look at the breakdown of the M-shaped curve, it is mainly due to the increase of non-regular workers. The left side is the graph of 1992, and the right side is 2007. And after their late 30s, non-regular workers account for more than half. In Japan, as Abe-san mentioned, the liquidity of labor market is generally low, so it is usually very difficult for women to find a regular work again once she left her job. So a traditional pattern is that a woman starts working as a regular worker after graduation, leaves the job when she gets married or gives birth to her first baby, and after her last child gets to 10 or 12, she enters the labor market as a low-paid part-time worker, such as a checkout cashier, for example. And it is pointed out that many women prefer non-regular work because of its flexibility, short-time working, the fact that it is part-time and requires a low level of responsibility. And this is the comparison between male and female regarding the labor participation rate. The majority of female workers is comprised of non-regular workers, and the proportion of female non-regular workers is bigger, much bigger than for males, even at younger ages, about half. And this is the graph of gender gap of average age. The gender gap of the average wage of regular workers, the blue graph, the gap is about 30%, 27%. The gender wage gap for regular workers is mainly due to the gender gap of the average length of service under the seniority system and double career tracks, as Abe-san mentioned, Ippanshoku and Songoshoku, the different track problem. And this is the change of women's employment status in life events. As Abe-san mentioned, over 60 or about 70% of women leave their jobs after having their first baby. The proportion has not changed for 20 years. And the analysis is that the effect of increased retention rate of regular workers has been offset by the increase of the share of non-regular workers, which are not in reality not protected by the child care leave systems. And look at the reasons why women leave jobs after giving birth. A major reason is the difficulty of balancing work and life due to long work hours. The fact that about 40% I would like to emphasize the other aspect. The fact that about 40% women voluntarily choose to leave jobs implies the myth of the 3-year-old child remains. You may know about the myth. For sure, I will explain a little about this myth. The myth of 3-year-old child means that a mother should stay at home and should concentrate on raising her child by herself until the child reaches the age of 3. Japanese women have been educated to be a good wife and wise mothers, and they still tend to adhere themselves to such roles. In the most recent attitude survey by the government, the share of the respondents who agreed to such a traditional idea of gender role increased for the first time since the survey started in 1979. And one of the major hurdle of the work-life balance is the you often hear Taikijidou Mondai, the problem of childcare waiting list. The official number of children on the childcare waiting list is about the number last year, 23,000. But the potential demand is estimated around 850,000 to 1 million is the potential demand. And one of the important issues is that the services, childcare services provided mainly by public or social welfare corporations do not fully respond to diversified demands of the parents, such as services during the night and for periods of illness. And another hurdle, the other important hurdle of work-life balance is the working hours problem. In Japan, the majority, 2/3 of males work long hours, and the majority of female work short hours. You can see a clear contrast between male and female, the working hour. And here, I will explain the relations between the female labor participation rate and the fertility rates, birth rates. There is an evident tendency for developed countries with a higher FLP rate, female labor participation rate, to have higher birth rates. You can see positive correlation between the two. But in Japan, the increase in the FLP rate has led to a decrease in the birth rate due to the insufficiency of social support for balancing work and life, especially childcare services and long hour working time. And here, let me show the relationship between both the problem, FLP, and the low birth rate. The reality is that a large number of women are still, in Japan, still faced with choosing between work or family, raising a child, or a career or family, even in lucky cases. This is the work-life conflict. This severe situation leads both to low rate of FLP, the M-shaped curve problem, and the low birth rate, declining birth rate. And this is the international comparison of the women in managerial position and the board. Despite the national target set in 2003, more than 10 years ago, 30% women in leadership position by 2020. But in reality, the share of women in leadership positions, managerial positions or board, still remains very low. And this is the share of women in leadership position by industry. The share of women in leadership positions is higher, relatively higher in service industries, and on the other hand, the lower in energy and manufacturing. The second part is promoting working women for Japan's growth policy. This is the speech of Prime Minister Shinzo Abe last April, 2013. As Abe-san mentioned, this is the first time for him to make a clear statement about the Womanomics, I think. He clearly stated that the third paragraph, women participating actively in society, tends to be mentioned in the context of social policy. However, I see it quite differently. I view it as forming the central core of my growth policy. And his favorite phrase is a Japan in which women shine. He states that women can shine whether women are working in corporations or women stay at home. And this is the Japan revitalization strategy announced last June. As an important section, creating a women-friendly work environment and restoring vitality to society. And the main target is to boost the employment rate of women, the valley of the M-shaped curve, from 68% to 73% by 2020. And the two directions are showed. The first one is implement plan to accelerate the elimination of childcare waiting list. And the second is to support company initiatives that promote women's active participation and enhance companies' workplace environment. And this is the agenda for the evolution of the growth strategy. This was announced last January to show the agenda to be discussed for the renewal of the growth strategy scheduled to be scheduled in this coming June. Creating a world-class environment where workers and enterprises can fulfill their potential. And the working style reforms, including promotion of active social participation by women. And the next growth strategy, we're trying to focus on the after-school childcare program. And also, the important agenda is tax and social security systems neutral to working styles. Establish a new panel for the promotion of the policy. And here is the potential of female workers. How the government's view of promoting working women. The government officially estimated that if potential female workers, about 3 million, actually, if they actually worked, they would earn about $70 billion, which corresponds to 1.5% of Japan's GDP. This estimate seems rather modest, I think, compared to other estimates by Goldman Sachs and the IMF report, because this is based on the assumption that the gender gap of average income is as it is. The last part is the issues and METI's program. This is the whole picture. There were, regarding promoting working women, there were problems of women labor in Japan, both in quantity and quality. The quantity issue is that as many as 60% of women quit jobs at giving birth, mainly due to the difficulty of work-life balance, M-shaped curve problem. And on the other hand, the quality issue is also important. The quality issue is that women's potential is not fully utilized, and the women's share at the decision-making level is extremely low. The so-called mommy's truck problem, as Abe-san mentioned. In both issues, if improved, we could expect the synergy effects between each other. But my personal view is that the efforts to address the quantity issue, mainly by Ministry of Welfare, has gone ahead. On the other hand, the quality issue is behind, because it's part of the quality issue is a part of each company's management matter, and it's difficult for the government to reach and control directly. And our bureau in METI now focuses on the quality issue rather than the quantity issue. Now I will explain the major programs to address the quantity issue and then the quality issue. This is Japan's child care leave systems. Legal requirement is that 12 to 18-month child care leave and 3 years shortening of working hours are given to all employees. And my view is that in large companies where such legal measures have been fully established, female employees rarely leave their jobs after having a child. But on the other hand, in SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises, it is still difficult for female employees to actually use the measures. And this is the vicious cycle of discouraging the promotion of women in Japanese company. It's very similar to what Abe-san said. Male managers unconsciously, in a typical Japanese company, male managers tend to unconsciously because they are influenced by the traditional idea of the stereotyped gender role, they tend to refrain from assigning challenging missions to female workers. And then even before female workers have a baby, female workers' motivation goes down, and then when they face with the work-life conflict after having a baby, they tend to leave jobs or become low performers if they continue work. And then, again, male managers believe again female workers are not reliable. And this is called statistical discrimination, some experts point out. In order to cut off this vicious cycle and create opportunity for business people, especially top leaders and HR managers, to find diversity management as an important source of competitiveness, METI launched the Diversity Management Selection 100 project 2 years ago. This project aims to promote the diversity management by collecting best practices and appealing its importance as a business strategy. And the first year, we selected 43 enterprises, and last year, we selected 46 enterprises from 135 applicants. This is the list of the selected companies, and you can see about half of the selected companies are from SMEs and various industries and various various regions we selected. And this is a major best practices. And the second project we're making efforts is the Nadeshiko brand. This is METI and the Tokyo Stock Exchange jointly launched this project from 2 years ago. And this project aims to recommend for investors, such as enterprises, excellent in promoting women's performance as attractive targets with potential for long-term growth. Here is the selection process. First, we make scoring regarding women's empowerment based on career support for women and work-life balance aspect. And the second, we screen companies based on the financial aspect using the ROE. And this is the list of the selected enterprises, top 26 brands by sector last year. And finally, I would like to explain about the tax and social security system which influence the women labor participation in Japan. These are the income distribution of married women for each generation. Above 30s, you can see its peak around 1 million yen per year. This is because many female part-time workers adjust their working hours for their annual income not to exceed the limit for tax deduction for spouses 1.03 million yen and exemption for social insurance fee 1.3 million yen. If we want to increase the FLP rate, female labor participation rate in Japan, it is clear that we should consider reforming such a tax and social security system. However, roughly speaking, about 2/3 of married women earn less than the limit, this limit, 1.03 million yen, which means the majority of the current Japanese families benefit from this current system, tax and social security system. And also, importantly, it is regarded as a symbol of the social respect for a good wife who stays at home and helps her husband's success at the workplace. That's why it has been extremely difficult to raise this issue. But this time, these issues are put on the agenda to be discussed so that the systems becomes neutral to women labor participation. this is the this graph shows the change of actual family income. As wives' salary income increases, you can find two discontinuous points. The first one is the barrier of 1.03 million yen remains due to spouse allowance paid by private companies, also public servants, associated with the limit of tax deduction. And the second barrier is the barrier of 1.3 million yen is made by the institutional limit of the exemption of social insurance fee. In conclusion, I would like to say that Prime Minister Abe's message that Womanomics is the core of growth policy has surely, as Abe-san repeatedly stated, surely inspired social awareness and motivated companies to promote diversity. I heard a lot of positive comments from business people, and the atmosphere around them has been surely changing for a positive direction. Now, I think the remaining issues we should focus on are these two. The first one is to promote work-life balance in workplaces. Work-life balance should be promoted by increasing flexibility of working, as Abe-san said, rather than over-generous family support, which may disadvantage women in career development. And the second, to motivate women to pursue career development, we need to think about creating a good incentives through career education and the reviewing the tax and social security system. And I really feel that the change is occurring. Again, now it's a good chance to accelerate the change. And I really feel that the power of media in this regarding this issue is really important. So I would appreciate your support for Japan's Womanomics. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sakamoto-san. Very important information. Okay, so now let's open up the floor to questions. The press gets first call. Okay, go ahead, Peter. Yeah, go ahead, David. Daniel, sorry.
Daniel Leusink. I'm a correspondent for het Financiële Dagblad, the Financial Daily from Holland. And my question is for Abe-san. What are the strengths of career women compared to their male workers? In what things are the women better than their male counterparts?
オランダの金融新聞のものでございます。安倍さんへの質問でございます。キャリアウーマンの強みっていうのは何でございましょうか。その男性の働いている人に比べると女性の強みっていうのはどこにあるんでしょうか。
男性女性っていう性別の強みより個体差といいますか個人の違いの方が私は大きいんじゃないかなって個人的には思っています。本当にいろんな人たちがいますので、機能でいうと体の機能でいうと男性は子供を産むことができない女性は子供を産むことができるっていうのはあるとは思うんですけれどもね。であとは教育育ってきた家庭でどんな教育を受けてきたかっていうのはこれは意識メンタリティとかですねそういうのを形成されるのに非常に育った環境あるいは受けてきた教育っていうのが、影響していると思うので、その辺のところもなんて言うんでしょうね考えながら判断した方がいいんじゃないかなっていうふうに思ってます。答えになってますか
I'm sorry, I don't know if this will properly answer your question, but I don't look at differences between male and females. I don't try to think about which gender has great strengths in certain areas at all. I rather think that each individual is very, very different. I think there are lots and lots of different kinds of people in the world. Of course, if we look at things in a very practical way, yes, men cannot give birth and women can. That's a very distinct difference. But in other areas, I think it depends on the education that people receive, the kind of home, family environment that they grew up in. I think this goes a great way into developing a person's mental faculties and status and their fundamental mental strength. I think these are the things that one should look at rather than gender differences. My personal opinion, I don't know if that answers your question.
Okay, any more questions from the press? Yes, please go ahead.
Very much. Andrew Staples, Economist Corporate Network, and to Sakamoto-san. Thinking about some of the programs that you've introduced to us from METI today to try to increase female labour participation, what are the key metrics that will tell you that you've had success or not? There's some very ambitious targets from the Prime Minister. Do you think you're doing enough? Is there a need for quotas in Japan or punitive measures against companies that don't increase female participation? Thank you.
坂本様へのその質問でございます。コーポレートネットワークのものでございます。今までたくさんのその政策についてご説明をいただいたのでございます。それによってその女性のその仕事参加率っていうんでしょうか、をその増やそうとしている上げようとしているわけなんでございますが、いろんなデータを見ながらこういうようなその政策が成功したかあるいは成功してないかというなんかその結論は出てるんでございましょうか。もしその成功したその数字とかっていうのがあるんでしたら教えてください。そして今回その安倍政権、政府は非常に野心的なその目標を立ててるんでございますが、掲げてるんでございますが、これで十分だと思うんでございます。これを達成するために、つまりクオータ制が必要であるとか、あるいはその実際にその女性の参加率を増やさないような企業に対してその罰金とかなんか処罰をする、そういうような制度が必要だということを思いますでしょうか。
ありがとうございます。今日私は経済産業省での取り組みを主にご紹介をさせていただきました。当然、政府全体でそれぞれの役所がそれぞれの立場から取り込んでいるわけですけれども、経済産業省のこの2つの100選ダイバーシティ100選というのとなでしこ銘柄の2つの取り組み、今年度3年目に入るわけですが、率直に申し上げて、何もその法的拘束力を持たないこの啓発を中心とした取り組みで、私も正直最初はどこまで効果があるかなと思いながら始めたのが正直なところですが、非常にこの安倍政権、安倍総理からのメッセージのその影響と相まって非常にレベルが上がってきているというのは感じています。具体的に申し上げると、なでしこ銘柄ですけれども、33業種からそれぞれ業種ごとに1社選ぶという形をとっています。ただあまりに業種全体の水準が低い業種は選ばれないということなんですが、昨年度2012年度につきましては、33業種で17社という結果でした。これが、昨年度につきましては26社に増えているということは、まさに全体の水準が上がっているということだと思います。一方で、じゃあこれで足りるのか。野心的な目標とおっしゃったのは、2020年 30% ということだと思いますが、足りるのかということにつきましては、政府はさらに取り組みを進めるべく、今6月の成長戦略改定に向けて、ちょっとまだ調整中なので何がとは申し上げられないんですが、新しいもう少し踏み込んだ取り組みを政府全体でやるべく今議論を進めているところです。ただすみません、クオーター制に関して申し上げると、今それほど日本の中でクオーター制必要だという声にはなっておりませんので、今どちらかというと政府のフォーカスは情報開示を進めると。この我々の取り組みも情報開示の一つではありますが、もう少し踏み込んだ形での情報開示が進められないかということをやっております。ただ今後のその状況によってはまたそのクオーター制という意見が出てくるかもしれないので、そこは今やるやらないというのを決めているわけではございませんが、今の方向性はそういうことでございます。
So today, basically, I would like to clarify that all of the policies that I've described for you today are basically initiatives that have been undertaken by my organization, in other words, METI. When we look at the government overall, there are different agencies, different ministries that are involved in different initiatives, standing from their own diverse points of views, their own responsibilities that they have. In regard to METI's activities, as explained, there are two major initiatives that we have launched. One is the 100 Hyakusen, or the 100 selected companies, and the other one is the Nadeshiko brand, the flower brand, which is now in its third year. To be very, very frank, when we started these initiatives, I fundamentally wondered if they might be effective or not. After all, these are non-binding initiatives. We don't have anything, legal powers to force companies to do anything. Basically, what we engaged in are enlightenment activities, in other words, promotional activities to try to educate the public and educate and make people more aware of these issues. However, our efforts have fortuitously occurred at a time when Prime Minister Abe has become very, very vocal on this issue. And as a result, I think we've developed a very, very positive forward momentum. For example, going back to the Nadeshiko brand, I explained that we covered basically 33 industries, and we tried to select one company from each industry. However, we decided from the very beginning that if the overall industry was not very receptive to promoting women, then we weren't going to choose, even if a company was the best in that industry, we were not going to choose that company to receive the Nadeshiko designation. So for fiscal year 2012, we chose 17 companies out of 33 industries. However, last year, we chose 26 companies out of the same 33 industries. So we think we are seeing a positive development. In other words, an overall rise in the standards or level of awareness about these issues in Japanese society, in the Japanese business world. You mentioned earlier that the Japanese government had set forth very ambitious goals, and I think what you're referring to is this 30% of leadership positions by 2020 will be filled by women. As I can't really go into detail about this, but as you know, the government is progressing with internal negotiations at present, because in June it will be announcing revisions to its current growth strategies. There are many, many things that are being discussed, and I can't go into detail at this time, of course. However, what I can say is that in regard to a specific question that you raised about quotas, the government's understanding right now is that there are not enough voices or not enough of a push within Japanese business right now to go to call for a quota system. So that is not something that is being debated seriously at this point. What the government is trying to do is to promote awareness, increasing awareness of people about this issue. And the way to do this is to promote more disclosure, information disclosure. And in fact, what I'm doing today, the information that I shared with you today, is a part of that activity. However, I would like to say that right now, the quota system implementation is not something that is being very seriously discussed. However, if the situation changes in the future, that is something that can be considered.
Thank you. Okay. Anybody else from the press, please? Yes, Carsten, go ahead. Yes.
Carsten Germes from Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung is a German newspaper. Apart from the quota, you said bringing women to workforce means more diversity. And if Japan wants to compete internationally in global markets, you need more diversity. Women alone doesn't guarantee diversity. So what gives you the confidence that Japanese companies not only need women to fill the gap, because you don't have immigration, and all do the same, agreeing to what the boss says? What gives you the confidence that women have the power to bring in different thinking? This is a complete different story. So to both of you.
フランクフルトの、新聞のものでございます。そのクオータ制について分かりました。で、先ほどのお話を聞いておりますと、やはりそのグローバル市場で競争するためには、やはりそのディバーシティが必要である。そしてですので、その日本の企業はもっと多くの女性を雇用すべきだというお話があると思うのでございます。しかし私が申し上げたいのは、女性をたくさん雇用したから必ずしもそれでそのディバーシティをが保障されるわけではない。必ずしもそれが実現するわけではない。つまりその女性であってもやっぱりボスが言うことははいはいってただ素直に聞く人もいるかと思うんでございます。そして先ほども触れましたんですけれど、日本は今のところその移民制度を変えるということを考えていないということでございます。でありますので、その女性を導入することによってそのディバーシティが本当に実現するこのような新しいアイディアが生まれるということをどのようにそれを保証できると思いますでしょうか。
これはやっぱりね、この問題の本質はですね、日本的雇用慣行、ここをメスを入れるっていうことではないかと思っていまして、女性という人を、なんて言うでしょう、登用するからとかうんぬんっていうんじゃなくて、やっぱりこの問題の本質はですね、やっぱり雇用市場が流動的ではない、流動性が高くないっていうところと、もうなんていうんですかね、相関関係にあるようなことだと思うんですね。つまり例えばノルウェーだとペナルティもあって、クォーター制導入しているわけですけれども、今非上場企業が逆に増えてきてしまったりとかですね、あるいはいろんな実証分析とか見ていますと、必ずしも成功してない例もあったりもして、これは因果関係って難しいと思うんですね。女性を活用したから企業の業績が本当に上がったかどうかっていうのは、その前の段階で為替レートが変わっていたりとか、あるいはいろんな環境、取り巻く環境が変わっていたりすると、その因果関係というのを証明するのはなかなか難しい、財務的に、もともと回復する状況にあったところで女性を登用していたかもしれないし、それは会社のシチュエーションによってすごく違うから、これ立証するのは非常に難しいところがあるんですね。で、私が申し上げたいのは、日本的雇用慣行が変われば、つまり、ライフタイムエンプロイメントシステムですとか、あるいはシニオリティベースペイメントシステム or プロモーションシステムとか、そういったものがですね変わってくれば、あるいは一旦キャリアが途絶えても、一回退いてもまた復活できる、そういう今日本には敗者復活って言葉があるんですが、一回過去に負けた人が復活するということを指すんですが、私は敗者復活じゃなくて大者復活、そういうそういうのが通用するような世の中になれば、競争力、つまりこれは別に女性だけじゃなく男性だけじゃなく、いろんな人が、外国の方もそうですし、いろんな方、力があって働きたいっていう意欲のある人が、みんなが力を発揮して働き続けられる、そういう職場環境が整えられるんじゃないか、そういう意味でダイバーシティは重要じゃないかっていうふうに申し上げています。
It's a very good question. Thank you very much. I believe that the true essence of this problem lies not so much in women's issues, but the whole answer fundamentally to this issue of getting diversity into a company, the answer basically lies in changing Japanese traditional business employment practices. I think you have to take a very, very large scalpel to employment practices that Japan has maintained for many, many years. In other words, just simply bringing more women into the labor force doesn't necessarily magically solve all of your problems. What is truly necessary is to ensure that there is more labor fluidity in Japan. I think that you can find a direct correlation between the amount of fluidity that you have in the labor market and the amount of diversity and innovation and positive development for companies. Having said this, of course, the answers are not always so clear-cut. For example, we look at the example of Norway. This is a country that has taken in the quota system. You have seen penalties placed on companies that do not abide by the quota system. But you've also seen that many companies have decided to delist as a result. And you've also looked at all of the different data available for different companies. And it's very, very difficult to determine very clearly whether having, for example, more women in a company really helps a company in its bottom line or not. For example, there are many other factors at work. For example, just before there was a policy change, before a company decided to bring in lots of women, there might have been currency fluctuations. There might have been a change in the business environment. There might have been something to do with the finances of the company that affected the final results, and it didn't necessarily have to do anything with women. These kinds of data are very difficult to analyze. It's very, very difficult to give a clear-cut answer as to whether women has changed, the employment of women has changed a company's results. However, what I can say is that if a true change is implemented in the Japanese labor and employment practices in this system, in other words, changing the seniority-based pay and promotion system, changing life and learning employment system, if we can have an environment where we have more labor fluidity, what I like to say is that in Japan we have this phrase which is haisha, or people who are defeated, fukkatsu, they revive again, they get another chance, they shine again. And I would like to change that and say not the haisha or the defeated, but the taisha, people who have left a company. Also get another chance. They fukkatsu or revive again. And this goes beyond women and men. It goes beyond Japanese and foreigners. It means that anyone with a will to work, with a capacity to work, people who have some contribution to make to a company, if they can be allowed to work over the long term in an environment that allows them to develop their full potential, that will lead to a revival of companies.
Okay, want to answer?
簡単に。すいません、ちょっと先ほどの女性を活用すれば、業績が上がるかという点については、因果関係は確かにおっしゃるようになかなか難しいと思っていますが、女性の登用が進んでいる企業の方が、業績が良いという相関関係についてはいくつか今日お持ちしてませんが、データを集めていつもご紹介をしているところです。ただご指摘のように単に女性の数を増やすということですとダイバーシティ効果は出ないというのはおっしゃる通りだと思っておりまして、先ほどちょっと、量と質というお話させていただきましたが、管理職比率登用に代表されるようなきちんとその多様性を生かせているかどうかというまさにダイバーシティ経営をその経営戦略としてきちんと実践できているかどうか、それは外国人でも全く同じだと思いますが、多様な人材をその多様性をダイバーシティ&インクルージョンと言いますが、多様性を生かしているかどうかというところは企業の競争力にとって力になると思っています。すみません、ちょっと繰り返しになりますが、量の問題、よく人口減少でその生産年齢人口の減少を補うために女性の就業率を上げなければいけないというのは当然ながら、個々の企業の競争力として考えれば単に数を増やすだけではイノベーションが起こるわけではないので、そういう意味でクオリティの方が非常に大事になってくると思います。でその移民政策については今議論を進めているところです。簡単に結論が出るものではないと思いますけれども、女性についてはまず数が多い、そのボリュームがあるということでダイバーシティ経営の試金石だという位置づけで進められればと思っています。
I would just like to add that certainly in regard to this question, simply increasing the number of female employees, does that necessarily add to the bottom line? In other words, does it lead to more profitability for a company? As was explained by Ms. Abe a few moments ago, the cause and effect relationship between these two factors is very, very difficult to prove. Having said this, however, there are correlations that show that this is probably true, and it's this correlation-related data that I've been trying to present to you in my presentation. But certainly what you are suggesting, implying is a very, very important point, which is that simply increasing the numbers of women employees is not necessarily going to give a company the positive effects of diversity. In other words, as I explained, it has to do not only with quantity but with quality. For example, having women, not just larger numbers of women employees, but having women in important managerial positions. In other words, is this idea of diversity management, inclusion and management, is that really part of this the company's core strategies, strategic policies? Otherwise, you're not able to make full use, exploit the positive effects of diversity. And it does, but in other words, you're not able to become able to have the positive effects of diversity add power and strength to your competitiveness. So again, it is not simply enough to have more women. I understand that there is an idea in society that because the population overall is decreasing, we must compensate for the decreasing labor force by adding more women to the labor force. That's valid in itself, but that in itself is not enough. Just simply having more women does not necessarily guarantee that you'll have more innovation within your company. You need diversity, and it needs to be part of the core management policy of a company, and it needs to be diversity that includes not only women, but also, for example, non-Japanese as well. In regard to this non-Japanese part, there are still ongoing debates about what to do about immigration policy in Japan. There have not been any conclusions drawn yet, but still, if we look at the inclusion of different persons, non-traditional persons, including women, if you approach it from not just simply a volume approach, but a quality approach, then obviously we are seeing positive results.
Okay, thank you. All right. Is that all right? Yep. Okay. Haruko-san, どうぞ。
Thank you. Thank you, Lucy. 春子渡辺 HKW。日本語でお伺いします。ユネスコの女性とメディアコンサルタントをしてまして、アジア、アフリカで女性とメディア、特に女性ジャーナリストを育てるという仕事をしておりました。で、日本ではメディアの女性とネットワークを組みまして、女子学生をメディアに投入するためのいろんなセミナーなんかやってきました。それでですね、やっぱりジャーナリストというのは個人プレーですから、どうしてもそのメリットベースでクオーターということを、あまり議論しなかったんですが、最近考えてみますと、やはり数だと 民主主義で影響力があるのはやっぱり数だと。で1人2人がですねどんなに優れたジャーナリストであってももう全体が動かないにはどうしようもないと。でそれでそのノルウェーのようにですね、40% の役員をボードルームの 40% 女性にしたいと思ってもそんな日本が動かないんですよね。これ法律で決まれば少しは動くかもしれませんが決まらない限り動きようもない。でそこでそのメディアの役割として考えてほしいんですがやっぱりそのキーワードは政治だと思うんですよね。でそうしますと政治家に女性を増やすためにはやはり候補者をクオータ制にしないといけないんじゃないか。つまりその民主主義に選ばれる前にですね候補者にならなければ選挙されないわけです。で、右か左か真ん中かっていうんじゃなくて女性候補者を動かすような方向の論説なり編集なり記事なりが必要なんじゃないでしょうか。安倍さんにお伺いします。
はい、ご質問ありがとうございます。あ、すいません。そうでしたね。
So, I've been very involved in UNESCO activities to promote women in journalism, especially in Asian and African nations. We conduct, for example, seminars for young students, women who might consider going to the media. And because the world of journalists is very much a world where individuals work on their own, we haven't really thought about mass numbers. We haven't thought about quota systems. But as time passes, I've come to realize that numbers are very, very important. In other words, in democratic society, it is numbers that truly make a very, very crucial difference. For example, when we look at the situation in Norway, there are these laws that are in place that require boardrooms to be composed 40% by women. 40% of board members have to be women. In Japan, even if we set forth these ideas, unless it's compulsory, Japanese companies will not make these changes, will not implement these kinds of huge changes. Of course, the media was going to play a very, very important role in trying to effect change, but in the end, it is politicians who are going to actually be instrumental in realizing new laws, etc., in truly creating change in society. So therefore, I think the first thing that needs to be done is to have not a quota system necessarily, but to have more women become candidates in political races. Rather than finding people on the right-wing corner or the left-wing corner or the middle-of-the-road corner, but having just simply more women appear as candidates, I think this is something that the media can be very, very instrumental in realizing through editorials, articles, etc. What do you think about this idea? Especially to Mrs. Abe, excuse me.
はい、私はですねこれ民間企業と政府あるいは政治っていうのは分けて考えなきゃいけないかなというふうに個人的には思っております。取材をいろいろしていくとですねクォーターに関しては非常に意見が分かれます。民間企業に関しては自主的な取り組みにとどめるべきではないかという意見もあります。と言いますのはやはり、数合わせになってしまっては本末転倒ではないかという意見があるわけですね。やはりこのポストにふさわしい人、ふさわしいバックグラウンド、実績、あるいは資質、ライトスタッフですね、そういったものを備えた人がならないと、じゃあ逆に逆差別になるんではないかとか、そういう意見もあります。で、政治に関してはフランスのパリテ法ですとか、あるいは韓国でも導入されてますが、候補者のところのこれっていうのはよく議論をしていって導入っていうのは検討する余地はあるんじゃないかなというふうに思っております。であとはですね、さっきのクオータ制に関しては、ダボス会議皆さんもご覧になったと思うんですけれども、あれをずっと中継、セッションをインターネットで見てたんですけれども、イスラエルでしたか、中央銀行のフルグ総裁ね、女性の方は逆噴射が起こるっていう表現をされてたと、バックラッシュが起こるよっていう話、ふさわしくない人が投与された場合、そういうふうにおっしゃってましたね。それからラガルドさん、 IMF の専務理事のラガルドさんはもともとはクオータ制に反対の方のようですけれども、ある日私は考え方が変わったというふうにおっしゃってましたね。なかなか変わらないことに関しては最初のステップとしては期間限定で必要ではないかというそういう議論もあるみたいですね。で同じく隣に座っていらっしゃった日産、そしてフランスのルノーの CEO をされているカルロス・ゴンさん、私もこの方インタビューしたことありますけれども、彼は日産に入った時にですね、非常に管理職の比率が低かったと、これは数値目標かなんかを導入しないといけないなというふうにその数値を見て決めたとおっしゃってて、でそれが今ものすごくその比率が上がったというふうにおっしゃってる。ただ ペナルティがあるものではなくて、あくまで目標、ニューメリカルターゲットみたいな形にしていると。だから、企業の身の丈でだいたいどれぐらいの20代の人がいる、30代の人がいる、どういう力のある人がいる、経験をした人がいるっていうのをちゃんと個別にちゃんと見極めた上で、身の丈の計画、社内向けの計画、アピールする対外的なものじゃないですよ。そういったものを設ける自主的な取り組みとしてやる分には私はいいことだとは思います。ただ目標値を高く掲げてこれがかっこいいかのごとくやっている、経営者も全くいないかといえば、取材してたら残念ながらそういう方もいらっしゃいます。一部社名は言いませんけれども、だからそういうことになってしまうと何のための改革なのかというふうに思ってしまいます。だからそこはやはり、変な話ですね、管理職の数字なんて企業はやろうと思えばいくらでも水増しできるわけですよね。権限あるいは部下のいない、管理職って言ったらもう増やそうと思えばいくらでも増やせるわけですよ。極端な話でもそんなことをして何の意味があるんですかと、そういうふうに私は思います。だから身の丈で企業がイノベーションを起こすための職場環境を整えるためにどういうふうにしていかなきゃいけないのか、その時にダイバーシティなんだっていう話で、先ほどもう一個言い忘れたんですが、今消費市場が世界にものすごく変わってきてますよね。今まで買ったことのない商品を新しい消費者が買うっていうことになってる。そういう微妙な市場の変化の兆しに同じ同質の考え方の人ばっかりで供給者がね、固まっている組織でビジネスチャンスを逃さずに先手を打ってコンペティターよりも先に手を打つことができますかと。やっぱりいろんな人材がいる方がそういうアンテナはあってですね、先手で打って対応できると。だからダイバーシティなんだと、そういうふうにおっしゃる経営者、結局環境変化に対応できるような機動力、エンジン、パワフルなエンジンがあるかどうかの違い、そこが会社の成長性っていうのに関係してくるかなというふうに思っています。
The interpreter would also like to explain, she left out part of the original question, which was that in the world of journalists, I think now that we need, even in the world of journalism, we need numbers. In other words, just simply to have even 1 or 2 star journalists is not enough to truly affect change. I think, therefore, that numbers are very, very important. And the response is that certainly, I think we have to separate what should be done by the government, what should be done by private companies. They're two slightly different issues. I'd like to talk a little bit about private companies and the idea of the quota system. I've talked with different people in the business world, and there are many, many different, of course, opinions. There are many voices raised that say that it should not be something that should be compulsory, but should be a voluntary system. And many other people often say that simply setting forth a goal, a numerical target, and forcing companies to fit that target is simply not enough. In other words, each company is unique in character, has a unique situation, unique employees, and you simply want to make sure that if you're going to promote a woman to a certain post, then you want to make sure that person has the appropriate experience, has appropriate background, appropriate character, quality. Personality should be someone that should be chosen because that person will do something positive in that new position. Otherwise, simply by just promoting women just so that you can say to the outside world, we have lots of women in managerial posts, will actually lead to a situation where the results are not good and will lead to reverse discrimination against women. We know, of course, that in regard to what you've suggested about having more women candidates for political races, the idea of having quota systems there, I know that some places, such as South Korea, and in Paris, in France, and also in I'm sorry, this is a French word which the interpreter doesn't know. It's called parité. Oh, a parity. The word parity seems okay. And for example, in South Korea, they do have these kinds of quota systems, and that's something I think that should be debated further. Many things come to mind when I think about this quota issue. I was watching some of the proceedings of the Davos World Economic Forum deliberations or conferences on the internet, and I saw that, for example, the governor of the Central Bank of Israel was saying that if we're not careful with this kind of idea, it could lead to a backlash against most women. On the other hand, the head of the IMF, Ms. Lagarde, said that originally she was against the quota system, but now she believes that perhaps it's necessary, maybe not on a permanent basis, but as a first step to effect change in an area where there has been no change for a long time. Maybe it could be something that would be a provisional, time-limited kind of quota system. But I also noticed, for example, that Mr. Gon of Nissan was also at Davos, and he was saying that he wasn't really thinking about a quota system at first, but when he first entered Nissan and he saw the numbers of women in managerial positions, he realized that you have to do something drastic. And so he did introduce a quota system, basically forcing women to be promoted to managerial posts, and that has changed the company in a very positive way. So I think the idea of perhaps setting numerical targets might be a very, very good idea. I don't know about the idea of making companies bear penalties if they don't if they don't meet these numerical targets. I think, as I said earlier, what's important is to realize is that each company has its own individual characteristics. A company must take the initiative to look at its employment staff to see what kind of people it has in the 20-year-old age bracket, 30-year-old age bracket, etc., to see what people have potential for growth, what people have experience already, and they must make policy decisions that will be appropriate and best for their own companies. What I think is very, very dangerous and should be avoided is for corporate PR image purposes to say we have so much percentage of women in managerial posts. I won't go into detail and I won't make specific names, but there are companies and managers who make these claims, and I think it has actually a negative result. Because the point is you can fiddle with the numbers and manipulate the figures any way you like. For example, it's very easy to promote women and say you're a manager, but not give her an office or give her support staff that she's actually managing. So this kind of thing goes against actual diversity. I believe that another thing that is important to keep in mind is that the reality is that markets are changing, consumers are changing. When you consider that consumer tastes are changing at such an astronomical speed, you have to wonder, is a company with a traditional kind of system where all of the people come from similar backgrounds and have similar thinking, will they be able to catch the changes in consumer tastes? Will they be able to create innovative new products and services to meet these new tastes? I think the companies that really take diversity seriously are the ones that are going to last. In other words, I believe that diversity is going to be the powerful engine that will allow companies in the future to meet the diverse and fast-changing nature of global markets.
Okay, thank you. We are gone way past the time. And Siegfried and Christoph, I'm sorry. I know that you wanted to ask a question. Do you mind just one more question? Just a quick question from me. I am dying to ask this question. Can you answer in 30 seconds or less? What is your survival technique as working women? Sakamoto-san, you have 3 children. You've got 4, twins and 2 other children. How do you manage everything?
お二人のそのサバイバル技術を教えてくださいんでしょう。どうやってその日本の社会でこうやって仕事を続けられてるんでしょうか。30秒以内ぐらいで、坂本さんは4人のお子さんもいらっしゃるわけでございますので。
非常にティピカルアンサーですが、一つは私の両親のサポート、もう一つはこれは、とっても大事だと思って広がっていけばと思っているのがフレキシブルワーク、在宅ワークです。私は8時9時ぐらいまでは職場にいますが、その後はおじいちゃんおばあちゃんとスイッチするために家に帰って、あと残った仕事は夜家でやれる環境がある。もうこれがワーキングマザーにとっては絶対的に大事で、せっかくなので申し上げると、なかなか日本の、労働時間法制の中でこれが広くやりにくい状況になっているのが問題だと思っています。
I'm sorry to give such a typical answer, but first of all, I wouldn't be able to have worked without my parents' support. And the second thing is that flexible work systems and also work systems that allow you to work at home. I think these are very, very crucial. I generally am allowed to leave work at 8 or 9 in the evening. 8時か9時ですか? 夜の8時9時に Yes, I'm allowed to leave at 8 or 9 in the evening. みんなすごく長く感じるので But among government agencies in Japan, that's early, being able to go home very early. And so then, and take over from my parents who've been looking after my children until that time, and then I'm able to continue my work at home. But this kind of flexibility, which is considered great in my case, is something that's very difficult to implement more broadly under existing Japanese labor laws. ちょっと早くないと思ってすいませんごめんなさい。
サバイバルテクニックって言っても、特に見当たらないんですけれども、私は一度もジョブホッピングをしたことがなくて、20数年間同じ会社で正社員でやってきた新聞記者なんですけれども、男の人が多い職場ではあるけれども、そんなことは自分が女性っていうのは自分自身では見えないんですね。ただトイレなんかは女性トイレもね、私ずっと貸し切りでしたけど少ないから。だけども何ですかね、仕事を楽しむで社内の人とコミュニケーションをする、そういう感じでなんかあっという間に気がついたらこんな年になってたっていうのが正直なところで、本当にもう本当に忙しかったし、で仕事が楽しかった、面白かった、大変なことはあるんだけれども、大変な失敗なんていうか大変なんだからこそ達成感とかもあってですね、なんか楽しんできたらあっという間に20数年経ってしまったっていうのが正直なところですね。
So I'm sorry, I don't have any special magical techniques to talk to you about. I believe that I've been very fortunate. I haven't done any kind of job hopping. I've been a regular full-time employee for 20 plus years. Certainly my work environment has been full of men, and I don't really think of myself as different as being a woman, etc. Of course, I have had a women's toilet, a female toilet, and I've basically had exclusive use of it for many, many years. That's the only difference. But fundamentally, I've just enjoyed my work tremendously. I think it's important also to communicate quite constantly with other employees. I haven't really thought very seriously about this issue. I just woke up one day and realized 20 plus years had passed and I was still working in the same company. And certainly when I look back over my career, I see that I've had difficulties, and I've had some terrible mistakes and failures, but it's because I've been able to overcome and experience these failures and mistakes that I feel this great sense of accomplishment. In other words, I've enjoyed my work, I've had great, tremendous fun, and one day I realized I've been working there for 20 plus years.
All right, thank you so much for both of you coming. We really, really appreciate it. Please come again. Okay, that's it for today. Thank you so much, everyone.